Thank you so much for joining the Surrey Board of Trade. I am Rona Doria, Events and Sponsorship Coordinator of Surrey Board of Trade. I want to welcome you to today's Digital Impact Learning Lab, a cost-effective recruitment, a WorkBC presentation. I wanted to remind you that if you have any questions during this session, please put your questions or comments in the chat function, and we will get to them as soon as we can. If we are unable to answer your questions, we will get back to you after the session is over. I acknowledge that we are in the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Kwantlen, Katsi, Kwiketlam, Kaikat, Semiyama, and Tuasan First Nations. As well, I acknowledge the Inuit and Métis Nations peoples who live and work on these territories. The Surrey Board of Trade is a Surrey City building business organization where we support business and bring business into the city. We are here to advocate for you, to instigate change at different levels of government, and to be your concierge of connections. Check our diversified portfolio at businessinsurrey.com. It is my pleasure now to introduce your facilitators this afternoon, Sadia Said, Employer Liaison Job Coach of WorkBC Employment Services, and Nate Tobes, Marketing Manager of WorkBC Assistive Technology Services. Sadia, over to you.
Thank you, Rona. I'll just share the presentation. Hi, everyone. My name is Sadia, and I work as a job coach with Newton WorkBC. We are going to provide you some information on WorkBC services. And so basically, I'm having some issues. Sorry about that. We are here to help you. Welcome to WorkBC. WorkBC help employers. WorkBC help new employees in finding employment here in Canada. So basically, our program is funded by the province of British Columbia and the government of Canada. Services are free of cost for all British Columbians. Services for local employers. WorkBC pre-screened applicants for your job openings. We can market your job opportunities. We can organize hiring fairs for your hiring need. We have wage subsidy program to support your hiring and training expense. We provide job start supports for newly hired employees. Marketing opportunities. Employers can definitely forward their hiring requirements to our WorkBC staff. The job postings are then forwarded to our team. I am from Newton WorkBC, but we have 2 other centers in Guildford and Wally. And we share the job posting with our job seekers. If an employer requests us, we can post these jobs on these social media platforms. We organize hiring fairs. Employers can request WorkBC centers to organize a hiring fair, whether in person or virtual, according to your hiring needs. All we need from you is the short description of the company, position's title, and how many people you are hiring for. We have target date for the hiring fair, company logo, and image file. We have a great program which is called Wage Subsidy Program. Wage Subsidy is a program to support employers in hiring new employees and rehired laid-off employees. Wage subsidy can reduce the hiring and training cost of new employees. Employer can get reimbursed up to 75% of wages for a certain period of time. So for example, if you're hiring an individual at $16 per hour for 35 hours per week, you can get reimbursed up to $6,500 from us. Wage subsidy employers eligibility. So you should have a registered business in British Columbia. You should have a WorkSafe BC account, a CRA payroll number. It should be a full-time positions, and basically the application is always submitted before the employee starts with you. How to apply for wage subsidy? You can check our website, which is workbc.ca employment services, and go to wage subsidy. You can also connect with us through the portal. I am from Newton WorkBC, and this has my contact information. From Wally, you can connect with Fernando, and Guildford, Rajbain is the main person to connect in regards to wage subsidy. In order to summarize wage subsidy, we do identify the needs of employers. We check the eligibility, whether the employer is eligible for the funding. We complete the document process. We have a legal agreement that is signed by 3 parties, and then employer submits us the claim form, pay stubs, and timesheet for the new hire. And then the portion of the wage subsidy is reimbursed on monthly basis. Since this is a disability month, this is a great resource I want to share with the employers. This is a small business grant of $2,500, which is available to the businesses. I can share the link with you. It's a good resource, and the grant is open until April 30th, 2023. And it's basically first come, first serve basis, so employers can usually look into the grant. I'll share the link. We have 3 WorkBC centers in Surrey, Newton, Guildford, and Wally. We are very active on social media. You can find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. And as we mentioned before, if you have any questions, you can type it in the chat box, and I would be more than happy to help you with this. Thank you. Over to you, Nate.
Thank you, Sadia. Wonderful job as usual. Just going to share my screen quickly, get this presentation up. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Nate Toves from the Neil Squire Society. We operate the WorkBC Assistive Technology Services Program in British Columbia on behalf of the ministry. 3 amazing WorkBC centers that Sadia mentioned. There's 102 in the province. So wherever you are in BC, if you know other people in the province, this isn't just a Surrey phenomenon. This program exists all throughout British Columbia. And as you're listening to my presentation today, not only do I want you to think about people that may be seeking employment or training through WorkBC, but this program I'm about to share with you can also benefit people you know in the community that are already employed, full-time, part-time, or self-employed. I'll expand on that in a bit. But first, we always start our presentations with what we call our Neil slide, because Neil was a real guy. That's how we got our name. Neil Squire was a 21-year-old university student. He was on the basketball team of U of Vic. He was an honor student, and I've had the pleasure of meeting many people in the Nanaimo area that knew Neil, and he was that great kid that you went to school with. Neil was on his way back to campus on a dark and stormy night and hit a patch of black ice, and his vehicle tumbled several times, and Neil suffered pretty well the most severe spinal cord injury you can and survive. That's severing his spinal cord at the C1 brainstem level, which left him paralyzed from the neck down, and of course, unable to move his arms and legs. But Neil's paralyzation was so high, you can see the trach device in his throat. That hose goes to a pump on the floor. That's actually what's operating Neil's lungs. Any muscle you don't use, you lose, and your voice box and larynx is really no different. So very quickly after the accident, Neil lost his ability to speak and communicate with those around him, his loved ones and the caregivers providing his care. The good news at the time was that Neil's family, along with some dedicated professionals, created a groundbreaking device which enabled Neil to speak through a computer using his breath. Now, if you see the tube in Neil's mouth, they used a sip and puff technology. Again, 1980, think about where technology was back then. And they used a modified Morse code language. So Neil would short puff, long puff, short sip, long sip, using this modified Morse code language. That cheat sheet is that modified Morse code language. And he would sip and puff the letters into words and into sentences. And it would show up on that monitor you'd have played Pong with back in the day. Anybody remember Pong? Or he could actually get it to print out on that printer, which is actually a modified teletype device, which tells you how old Mate is, because I used to use one of those in the 80s, sending orders from Grand Parade, Edmonton, and you would type at one end and magically the same thing would type at the other. So anyways, it took him a while to get this all going. Did I mention it was 1980? What do you think the first thing Neil said was? Mom, Dad, it's been ages since we chatted. Actually, I don't know if that's what he said, but that's probably what he said. You know what he said right after that? Hey, nurse, can you turn the darn heat down in this place? And I don't know if he said that either. But the point being, it changed his life dramatically. Obviously, his life was changed dramatically the day of the accident. But here now, with his ability to communicate with his loved ones and the caregivers, the nurses, the doctors, the physio and occupational therapists that were providing Neil his care, it made a huge difference. Fast forward to 1984, the team had expanded a bit. Expo 86 was on the horizon. Technology was moving forward at a rapid pace, and things were really getting exciting. And then Neil got pneumonia and died within a week, suffering kidney failure. It was a devastating blow to everybody on the team. Just for a moment, let's pretend we're that group of people that was working with Neil over the last 4 years, and he died yesterday, so today we'd be super sad. But we're at a rehab center in Vancouver, and we look over and we think, well, we can help that lady over there and that fellow over there, and they just wheeled that young girl in from the skiing accident. We'll be able to work with her. So that committed group of people in 1984 created the Neil Squire Foundation. To date, we've worked with over 50,000 people across Canada in a variety of ways. Now, we did a name change. Neil Squire Foundation is what we were in 84, but that's when people used to write checks. Remember writing a check? Well, if you had a nonprofit registered charity where your initials were NSF, yeah, we realized that wasn't a good idea. So in 1986, we changed our name to Neil Squire Society. And while we're still a society, nonprofit organization and a registered charity in Canada, we just brand under the name Neil Squire. So I encourage you to go to our website after this presentation and check out neilsquire.ca and look under programs. You'll find our new logo with 5 cogs in a wheel, and they represent research, development, and innovation, computer training with our distance computer comfort training program, where we have free training for persons with disabilities that want to learn about computers and computer software. Our employment programs that similar to WorkBC, but this is specifically for a population of persons with disabilities, connecting them with employers looking for talent. Number 4 is assistive technology. That's our superpower. Assistive technology weaves through everything we do at Neil Squire, and it's why we're on the 3rd iteration of an assistive technology program that you're about to learn about here in BC. And lastly, number 5 is collaboration. That's a big part of my role as well, is to collaborate with other organizations, let people know about our services, connect them to services, and then understand some of the other programs out there that can serve the population that we serve. So go check that out later. I encourage you to learn some more about the work that we're doing. So the program I'm about to share with you is called WorkBC Assistive Technology Services. I may have mentioned we like acronyms in the employment industry. Doesn't every industry have a lot of acronyms? So from now on, I'm going to call this WorkBC ATS. My role here is to unpack kind of the policy and read between the lines. WorkBC ATS provides assistive technology or supports, we'll cover that in a bit, to individuals with disabilities. So it's always an individual that applies for this program. Even when we talk about people that are already in the workforce working for a small business in BC, it isn't their employer that applies on behalf of their employee. So if you're an employer out there, I can tell you there's not a huge administrative burden on you for this program, just like the WorkBC Center. They're going to help you, right? Is there some paperwork you got to do? Absolutely. But it is not an administrative burden. In fact, because your team member applies, the only way you're involved if there's a cost sharing arrangement where I'm going to share that with you in a bit. So it's always the individual that applies. Individuals with disabilities. So what's a disability? Well, in the context of this program, it's any situation that is temporary, permanent, or episodic in nature that causes a physical or cognitive barrier to one's activities. Now, somebody's just put something great in the chat. Sadia, thank you. That's a different program through Small Business BC that can also provide some funding for modifications to the built environment. Go check that out after the presentation. To individuals with disabilities, to assist them to gain and sustain employment, self-employment, or community attachment. Again, as mentioned, 102 WorkBC centers around the province, no fee to use their services. In fact, you can even kind of get paid to use their services through the wage subsidy progress. So great program. Work-related assistive technology solutions are based on individual requirements and work situations. What that means is it's not cookie cutter. Everything is individualized for the person in front of us. Once somebody's approved, whether they're come through the WorkBC Center as somebody seeking employment and they have a barrier to job search, the training program out there, or the eventual job they secure, the first step is an assessment by one of our occupational therapists. People that are applying to us themselves, which I'll again share with you in a bit, that are already in the workforce, your sister, your brother, your cousin, your neighbor, people that are already in the workforce, same thing. Once we get through the paperwork, the process is the same. The first step is that assessment by one of our occupational therapists to truly understand that individual's barriers. So I can assure you, nothing about this program is cookie cutter. And we provide these services throughout the province of BC, wherever you are in the province. Canada's a big place, right? Thanks, Captain Obvious, somebody I'm sure just said. But what that means is that we've learned how to do distance assessments of our clients. We've learned and are very adept at training clients on the assistive technology we provide without being in the same room with them. That was key as we transitioned from in-person service delivery to virtual. We didn't really have much of a hiccup. Our biggest challenge was either getting the thing due to lack of some things being available, or getting the thing to the person. The fear of getting in, being in the same room as another human, and with the virus and all that. And I know there's still some fear out there. In fact, I'm fighting COVID right now, so it's good that we're virtual today. But we found a way, right? We have found a way to get the job done. We found a way to interact with other people in a safe manner. And quite frankly, we've had the best 2 years ever in this program. So a lot of people will ask me, Nate, what's the most common thing that you provide? Well, 70% of us work in a desk environment in 2022. And didn't it feel like we were tied to our desk for a couple of years? I know that's how I felt. So there's a lot of different things. If somebody could also put in the chat, askjan.org, www.askjan.org. That's the Job Accommodation Network, and it's a website in the US. And they have an exhaustive list of all the different assistive technologies out there to help somebody minimize or overcome a barrier as it relates to a disability, chronic pain, or an old injury. So in light of that, we do a lot of ergonomics in this program. Sit to stand workstations, a supportive ergonomic office chair for somebody that maybe has a bad back or some sort of situation where chronic pain is an issue. If you're suffering from PTSD, post-concussion syndrome, or anxiety, lighting can have a dramatic effect on that. Lighting is something we can help with. For somebody with a mobility barrier, restorative supports like canes, crutches, orthotics, prosthetics can be covered in this program. If you know somebody navigating the WorkBC employment services contract and they're hard of hearing or deaf, they'll be able to get access to ASL interpreting and captioning services to go through that program. As I mentioned, the focus of this program is smaller business. In BC, that's defined as 50 employees or less. And while there's no specific hard line, as we are tasked at ATS at looking at a company's revenue and many different metrics to see if their employees qualify, hearing aids falls outside of the duty to accommodate. All employers have a duty to accommodate their employees, but we know that many employers might be challenged with that based on financial resources in general, not knowing where to turn. And as all of you probably know, when somebody doesn't know what to do, they usually end up doing nothing. So we want to be there for those folks. So who do you know that's employed, full or part-time or self-employed, and they're losing their hearing and they need hearing aids? Hearing aids are $4,000 to $8,000 a pair in BC. There's no coverage through our MSP plan, our medical services plan. And even if you've got a strong benefit program at work, we found from administrating the program over the last 3+ years, $250 to $500 an ear is the common coverage. Hearing aids are $2,500 to $4,000 an ear. That leaves a huge gap for most British Columbians. Regardless of the size of your employer, if you need hearing aids to communicate at work, we may be able to help lessen that burden. Now, I did mention we do have to look at financial metrics, and it is a contribution model. So we do have to look at somebody's income less expenses, or if they're a family unit, family income less family expenses. But at the end of the day, we're able to bring some relief for most British Columbians. And that's been a really important part of this program. Workplace access and modification for eligible employers. So it's neat that somebody else put that Small Business BC program. That's a different program. There's some funding there. Well, this program can also help for an employee that has a barrier due to the built environment. As an example, they need an accessible washroom. So Sherry, who's in a wheelchair, who works for ABC company, 10, 15 person employer or whatever, but Sherry's in a wheelchair and she can't do toileting duties at work because they don't have an accessible washroom. So she can only work part-time. And maybe she has a role where working from home isn't an option. So Sherry would apply, and then we'd work with her employer. And if there's a different party that owns the building, we'd work with those two parties in a cost-sharing arrangement to create that accessible washroom so Sherry could work full-time and do her toileting duties at work. It's a great program. Ramp access for an older building, a hearing loop for an employee that's hearing impaired, ramp access for an older building. Many other things can be done through this program. But again, it's the individual that applies, not the employer. And then lastly, vehicle modifications. Again, as I mentioned, the focus in this program is smaller business, self-employed, community organization, stuff like that. Hearing aids are an exception, but so is to and from work. And I don't mean cabs, handy-dart, or transit, but what I do mean is if you know somebody in a manual wheelchair and getting back and forth to work is a barrier for them, there's a couple ways we can add power to that chair to assist them in getting from home to transit to work and back, or maybe directly from home to work and back. Or maybe they need to use their vehicle during the day like I do because I have this small territory called British Columbia and they have to drive. So we can actually help convert their motor vehicle to hand controls. Due to their disability and their inability to use their feet for gas and brake, we can modify their motor vehicle. They have to supply the vehicle. The program doesn't do that. But we can modify that vehicle for hand controls for gas and brake. If it's a van, we can add ramp access to the side or the back. If it's a pickup, we can do lift access. And if it's a car, like my boss who drives a sedan, he gets in the passenger side and drags his chair in after himself. But he uses hand controls for gas and brake. Those modifications are tens of thousands of dollars. We can make a huge impact for somebody in that situation, but they do have to supply the vehicle. It has to be approved by ministry. So it can't be a 10-year-old, van that you got from grandma that she used to use it, for church and back on Sunday. It has to be a fairly new vehicle where the province and the ministry can be confident that, you'll have that vehicle for 8 to 10 years or more. We've done a bunch of them. They take a long time, but we'll do a bunch more before the end of this program, which currently is slated at March 31st of 2024. This is a picture of our lab in Burnaby, state-of-the-art lab. The only other one that we're aware of in Vancouver, in the province, is at GF Strong Rehab Center in Vancouver. This is where we do a lot of our assessments. And I know through COVID that was changed, but we're starting to get back to normal functioning. We do a lot of trialing with our clients, training of our clients here, training of our staff. We can actually separate this lab. It's a decent size room into 2 distinct areas with one of those heavy duty accordion room dividers. We have 2 workstations chock-a-block full of all the latest and greatest in software, whether it be for somebody that's low vision, somebody that doesn't have tactile use of their hands, or maybe doesn't have hands, and they need different software solutions to engage in this digital world that we live in. It's an amazing lab. We've seen some great stuff happen there. I want to share with you a couple success stories before we tell you how to apply and wrap up. And if Rona, if you'd be so kind to put my email address in the chat. When it comes to the Q&A, we know that some people don't really want to share their story with the public, and we get that. We see that all the time, and we understand that. Or you might come up with some questions afterwards, and you can reach out to me because I'd be happy to answer them. nate@neilsquire.ca. This is Tony. This is a really good example of somebody that works in a large business. If you're from the Lower Mainland, which I'm sure most of you are today, Starline Windows is a huge employer. If you drive by any townhome, new home, or condo development, there's a good chance these guys are doing the windows. So they're a big employer. If Tony had a bad back, they wouldn't qualify for, Tony wouldn't qualify as an employee of Starline for help in this program to get a ergonomic chair or sit to stand workstation, because they have a duty to accommodate and they have the financial wherewithal, excuse me, to be held accountable for that. But again, hearing aids falls outside of that. Tony's disability is tinnitus or tinnitus in both ears, which is ringing in the ears. Now, it's been described to me as it can be anywhere from, not in Tony's case specifically, but for people in general, it can be a simple buzz to some people say it's like the church bells going off in their head. It can be absolutely debilitating. So with Tony, as a general manager, you can imagine he interacted with staff, clients, suppliers, you name it. He had quite a role, and the tinnitus or tinnitus, because you can say it both ways, was really impacting the work he was doing. So he qualified, he applied and qualified and was approved. Now, as the general manager, I assume he makes a pretty good dollar. And I don't know if he has a spouse or not, but again, we have to look at either his income less expenses or his family income less expenses. They probably had a pretty good employer or benefits program at Starline. So if any dollars for hearing aids were available, we'd have collected that. If he has a spouse, and that individual had benefits, we'd have collected that too. But at the end of the day, he was a success story, and we clearly took some of that burden from him and his family. And here's what he says: my hearing amplifiers have greatly improved my ability to perform all my duties at work. And I could not imagine going back and not using them. So great success story for Tony. This is a really good story of somebody who has a multiple barriered situation. This is Karen. I know Karen from the Lower Mainland. She's an amazing individual. Nothing stops this gal. And she's an administrator at her church. And she has cerebral palsy and scoliosis. Scoliosis is curvature of the spine, as you may be aware. And with Karen, what would happen with her scoliosis is she would lean a bit. And then the longer she would work, the more she would lean. And that would create two challenges for Karen. One, a chronic pain situation, and two, chronic fatigue. And it was debilitating for Karen in many ways from the pain standpoint, but it also shortened the amount of hours that she could work effectively. So she applied and was approved, obviously. And we got her this special chair, and you can see that wing on the side, that burgundy wing, is what helps keep Karen upright. And then with her cerebral palsy, she has tremors or shakiness. So we got her that keyboard, and while you can't see it very well in the picture, it has spaced out keys, much different than a regular keyboard. And then we got her very high-end word prediction software called WordQ, not like autocorrect on your cell phone. You know what I mean, right? When Karen has to do like a 500-word document for the church, she's actually typing less than 100 words, and the software is helping with the rest of it. It made a big difference for her. And as you can tell again by what Karen shared with us, with these supports, it makes work more equitable so that people with disabilities can participate in the workforce. She's an amazing person. I've met her several times, and personally, she's one of my heroes, because as a side hustle, she also helps other people with disabilities work on their resumes, cover letters, and work on interview questions. Great to have helped Karen with this program. So we have offices throughout the province: Burnaby, Victoria, Nanaimo, Kelowna. Currently, as I mentioned, I've got COVID, but I'm working from the condo office today. I'm currently at the kitchen table office. Later today, I might be at the couch office, and it's not very nice here in Burnaby, so I don't imagine I'll be on the patio office this afternoon, but you know what I mean, right? So how to apply? Remember, there's two distinct ways to get into this program. One, somebody who's working with one of the WorkBC centers in the province, and they're trying to do job search, they're trying to get into a training program, or they're trying to secure new employment. But they have a barrier, as we've discussed, caused by a disability, chronic pain, or an old injury. The other group of people is actually much larger. And this is your sister, your brother, your cousin, your neighbor, that lady used to play hockey with, or still do. That guy used to play softball with, or still do. But they're already in the workforce. They're employed full or part-time or self-employed. Again, mostly working in a small business. If you know that person, let them know about this program. Our biggest challenge is always awareness with these programs. So if they're working with the WorkBC office, they get referred to us through a mechanism, and we do all the magic stuff that I told you about. For people that you know in the community that are already employed, they can apply directly to us. They don't need to be affiliated or associated with the WorkBC Center at all. And while that's kind of a long URL, and it is, if you just go to workbc.ca and click on Employment Services, which is one of the main tabs, click on that. The fifth one down is WorkBC Assistive Technology Services. Your first step will be your BC Services card. If you already have that, you can move to the next step. And then it's really basic information. I assure you the application is not full of a bunch of legalese or industry jargon. We just want to know who you are, where are you in the province, what do you do for work or self-employment, what is your barriers, how does that impact your day-to-day activities, and what tools are you currently using. That comes to us, we vet that. There may be some back and forth, but once we get you to an approved status, whether you're, again, coming from WorkBC or already in the workforce, that process is the same. Work with the OT, do that assessment. The occupational therapist then generates a report, then works with our assistive technology specialist to determine that path. Is it this, or is it that, or is it all of it? And then we procure, arrange for delivery, setup, training if applicable, and then follow up in 24 weeks. It's a very thorough process. So as we wrap up here, 5 million British Columbians. There's only one Nate. I can't do this without your help. You know, we don't get big marketing budgets with these programs. They're all for providing the services, which is great, but you also have to find a way to let people know that this program exists. So if you know somebody that runs a small business, let them know about this program. If you know somebody that's self-employed, please let them know about this program. If you know somebody with a disability, great program. I run the same webinar every Wednesday from 12:30 to 1. We had a full house today. And we go through this in detail. Great people to see this again, somebody with a disability, somebody that runs a small business, somebody in HR, a practitioner that's frontline to people in pain, chiro, massage therapist, acupuncturist. They're often a good source of referrals because some of their clients may benefit from some of the work that we have or that we do. All right. So that's my presentation. I'm just going to check this question. All right, Harjot Gill, that is for you, Sadia.
Hi, Harjot. Definitely, we will be able to help you out. We do have a lot of potential candidates who have logistic background, and we can help you with the hiring. Yes, I can share my email in the chat box and my contact details, and you can reach out to me directly. I'll just put it there.
Yeah, in this tight labor market, you know, great to use the WorkBC offices, and you know, they provide so many services and multitude of programs that affect a lot of different people. So that's great. Any other questions, folks? All right. Wonderful job today, Sadia. Great to see you. I see only one or two staff members bothered you in the middle of the presentation.
Well, that's my colleague Berita. She's just sitting with me. She wanted to join, but the link didn't work. So I'll just introduce Berita.
Hi, everyone.
It's a team effort at WorkBC, folks, same as at Assistive Technology Services.
Yes, for sure.
All right. Okay, last shot for questions, folks. They're only 25 cents a piece. And you'll never get a bill. Fire away. You also have both our email addresses if something pops up later. Should you lose the email address, reach out to the folks at the Surrey Board of Trade. They know how to get a hold of us.
Yes.
And this has been Employer Disability Awareness Month. It's my busiest month of the year. I know I am exhausted, and looking forward to a Friday off to consider our Indigenous brothers and sisters and the work that we have to do with truth and reconciliation throughout the country. So I'm looking forward to some of the events on Friday.
And also, since you pointed this out, I am the committee member for Inclusive Employer Award. This year, the award ceremony is on 17th of November. So if you have hired anybody with diverse ability or disability, we can definitely nominate you. So just connect with the WorkBC centers or connect with me, and we can nominate you in different business category and recognize you.
Navjot, which program are you referring to? So no age restriction per se, but obviously employment is key to this. So we can't help seniors with hearing aids as an example if they're not in the workforce. But if they have an employment related path and they're working with the WorkBC Center, or if they're already in the workforce, employed full or part-time or self-employed, then they may qualify. And age doesn't really play into it if they have a business of going concern. Great question.
I have put the link for Inclusive Employer Award. So if you want more information on it, just go to the link, click on that link, and you'll find more information.
That's an awesome event. I'm glad that you folks are still doing that in Surrey. It's very important to recognize the great work that's happening, and I'm pleased that that event is still taking place each and every year.
This is the 8th one.
Which one? Sorry?
8th.
8th. Wow, good for you guys. That's amazing. Okay, if there's no other questions, thank you, everybody. Now, what's most important about all this, and I see you're still on the call, or most of y'all, action this. Do something about it. You've heard about a great program today. Who are you going to tell? What I've learned in my role over the last 7 years is that if you're a small business owner, and I have a small business, there's a lot going on, right? Tell somebody. Reach out to somebody else you know with a small business. Reach out to somebody else you know that's self-employed. Reach out to somebody else you know in a community or nonprofit organization. If you know somebody in HR, let them know about this. It's a really valuable program. And the worst thing that can happen is somebody gets left behind because the program ends. And maybe there's a new program in 2024. Maybe there's not, we don't know. But even if there is, it might be different than this one. And when they do decide to end it, like they did the last one in 2019, and this one officially ends March 31st, 2024. But what that really means is that in October, November of 2023, they send us that email that goes, we decide to wrap it up. Regardless of what's happening in April 1st, 2024, you have to stop taking applications until there's a new program. So we don't want to see anybody left behind. Make sure they're aware of this information. And then your time here was super valuable. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Sadia and Nate, for being with us today and for sharing your insights. We will be sending you the recording and the facilitator's contact information after this session. Many more of these type of sessions are coming up, so please be sure to check our website at businessinsurrey.com. Make it a great business day, everyone.